guess the people from before my time had great respect for the flow of the river. It had something to it, you know, that people come from the prairie or even from here in this area, go down along the river just to be a part of that, you know. And that was something, I guess it was life. It's just part of life for them. A certain time of the year you go down along the river just to be a part of that river.
Being down here by the river, and this place here brings back a lot of memories. It's been about 15, 20 years since the last time I camped down here with my family. And we used to be camped right in this area here. Camp here in usually in the spring or fall to come and get our supply of meat and fish. We'd spend at least a couple of months along the river here, sometimes 3 depending on the weather. While my brothers and my dad and I would, those days I was too young to go along most of the time, so my brothers and my dad would go up and hunt for the deer, and a lot of times I'd have to stay in camp with my grandmother and help around camp, or help my grandfather, while my grandpa would be fishing all day long. And if they got any deer, then my grandmother would, you know, start cutting the meat up and drying it, and that would be a process going on all through the cycle of the camp while we were here. The men would be hunting, bringing the deer, and my grandmother would be cutting and drying, and my grandfather would be fishing. And
well, this here was the old campground. Everybody camped in here, Indians, whites, homesteaders. And up in this draw here, and that draw over there there was springs where they used to get water if they didn't want to get them out of the river. And they'd pull in their camps here. They had this flat for their horses to graze on while they were camped here. And in the winter time, this was a great winter ground for wild horses and some cattle, and stay in here all winter without any feed. But whenever you wanted the wild horses in the winter, why, here's where they'd come in here. It seemed like they stayed in these breaks. It was pretty well sheltered, and there was a lot of grass in here. And it went clear on up when you're at the mouth of Crow Creek. That's where everybody camped. And in the summer, a lot of them would come up here with their families and fish and just have an outing up here. It's always that way when I can remember, when I was just a little kid. When I was about 10 years old, I guess, I was down over the hill here, or the cliffs. My granddad was up here fishing, and when he'd catch them, I'd take them off in the hook till I got scared of a snake that got one of my fish. I thought he was a rattler, and I left the country.
And on Polson, that park there, right below where they are swimming now, there used to be a lot of Indians. That used to be Indian land there. There used to be a lot of camp there. And they used to fish there. And old Baptist, he warned corn. He used to camp there all the time.
They used these rivers. They knew how to use it a long time ago, and they knew to watch for these rivers. They gather their many things along the river there.
We was across the river from Sloan's. Well, we did used to camp there to dig for a bitterroot, because that's a good bitterroot country. And to us, that was one of the musts of our daily diet, or well, whenever we ate, we had to have a bitterroot too.
And sometimes my grandma would come in as early as May, when the bitterroot was just getting ready to be about ready to dig. After the bitterroot feast, and sometimes we'd move up at that time too. And while we were hunting, my grandma would be digging bitterroot out there all day long.
Of course, and then along both sides, well, on the west side of the river, more or less, it's there's a lot of places in there that there used to be herbs and roots, and other than bitter roots, that they used to dig, and then that was for their blood tonics, body tonics. In the spring and the summer, they'd clean out by eating these different roots and whatnot, and for their ailments. And
up there by Ferry Basin was another, up on the foothills was another area that we camped yearly. And the reason why we camped there a lot of times was because my grandmother would walk from there to the top to get her moss for her camas, to bake the camas with. And she'd walk up there and she'd stuff her pillows and gunny sacks full of moss and pack it back down. That was about, a good 1.5 miles, 2 miles walk up the hill that she walked up every day to dig up the moss. And while we were there, we had the horses there. And then my brother and my dad and them would go on over the hill to do their hunting in there, that area. Between Buffalo Rapids and Sloan, I think there's an area there that we really used a lot, camping, and that was mostly in the fall time there just for the meat supply. And then that was quite a ways down to the river, but my grandfather used to walk down to the river every day and just sit there all day long fishing. And that's where the bigger camp was there. That's when most of the families would get together and really go all out and hunt. I remember times that, there derglows, all the derglows used to be there. Most of us, had horses in those days, so it looked like quite a war party whenever we start going hunting. We'd have a whole line of horses. I'm not positive, but I think I got a couple of pictures at home that there was a line up there, or just before we went hunting. Everybody lined up on horses, and a picture was taken. And there'd be 4 or 5 camps all the time. And you can, and years and years went by, you could still see the big piles of deer hair that they scraped off the hides. Because, when they were hunting and in between drying meat and everything else, they'd scrape hides and, store them for that fall, and then they'd work on hides.
When a long time ago, whatever they did, they had a special way how they do these things. Whatever they kill or whatever they capture, they knew. Well, today,
I remember whenever we went camping, if it was possible, my first things my dad would put up was a sweat house, He used to have a sweat house over here by there's a little pond back here. First thing he put up was a sweat house. And in the springtime when we were here, the river was high enough to where the water would come in back behind me and form a little pond back here, and that's where we put the sweat house up. And so whenever they came back from hunting in late evening, when everything was all done for the day, they'd take their sweats, and that was a daily thing that they did. Every day they took a sweat.
Sweat houses were an important thing. Seemed like the river and the sweat house went hand in hand, because you had your life, you had your nature right there, and you come out of the sweat house, you get in that river.
But along down the river there, that mother's aunt and grandma, they used to tell her, well, go down the river and you see the buffalo turds, go down there and play along there. They'll talk to you. The summer spirit, other than having the sun dances, but their spirit, it'll come and talk to you, give you a guideline and whatever for your life. You'll have something to go by. When you're down and out or something, you lost you fell off the path, get on the wrong highway, it'll always come back and help you. So she'd run down the river by Sloan's and play along the sagebrush and the rocks, see the buffalo turds out there. But maybe they never did say anything to her.
The river's, I guess it's part of life. The old people, they depended on it a lot for the many different things that were there. Not only for fishing, but for other reasons. I guess they had reasons for loving that river.
Well, it's very important. I think it's very important to me. Because we used to stay down the river for a while. Even now you could ask Teresa Ness, she always say she was my girl when she was a girl. She used to stay with us, and all my boys are all gone. She calls them my brothers. When she gets lonesome, she said she goes down the river.
That's them guys. It's worth a lot to me. I wouldn't take anything.
Yeah, that's the only thing I got to say is that belonged to us. We should never give it away.
Well, personally, the Flathead River to me means a lot, because that river was there when I could first remember, and I'd like for it to stay the way it is.
It is the culture. To me, that is the way it is.
Over towards Plains and Inez Gary would tell me these things. This would be a place. And here's a place of Vision Quest sites. He would tell me many of these places. And there was a big rock in the river. He said you could go way over the big rock and you could sit there. That's a place of Vision Quest. I guess where a young kid would be sent out there on that rock, and in the evening time, that little boy would get home, found a medicine. I seen that big rock. He pointed it out to me. The big rock sticking out. I guess they'd put a little boy there out there on top of that rock and then leave him there. Somehow the little boy would get back. It's quite a ways from home. He pointed out this place of vision quite. That's where we'll go throw John at. You're right around where Kerr Dam sits at. They used to talk about it was a Vision Quest site, but the white people. That's where my father was sent to by one of the elders. The person that's brought him there just got home, and here my father walked in the house too. That's a Vision Quest site around where the dam is at. That's probably why the dam caved in, because it was being disturbed. A Vision Quest site. And also where the horses used to graze along the river by Perma, across the river there. It's where they used to graze their horses in the winter times. Along the river there, the islands, that's where they used to live while the horses were grazing off across the river.
My granddad was Jackson Sundown. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of him. He became the world's champion bronco rider in 1918 at the Pendleton Roundup.
I know one time they had a bunch of horses up by Buffalo Bridge, west of Polson. They had this big white stallion and in a corral. Corral was 10, 12 feet. And this horse would just about make it out. He'd run around the corral and he'd crawl up the poles. And he'd just about crawl out. Sundown wanted that white pony. He passed the word back from Idaho. If you guys catch that pony or get him in the corral, save him for me. And that's when Enos Quickasu went over. He helped him and Whispering Charlie, I guess. They were young. And I said, boy, that's one horse they wouldn't have nothing to do with. The rest of the crew wouldn't have nothing to do with that horse. He'd bite, he'd strike, he'd kick, he'd run after a man on a horseback. And they didn't want nothing to do with that. So I said, Sundown, he wants him. So old man Quickasu went back, and Sundown was back at Rocky Butte. He went over, they got him in the chute. He put his saddle on, hackamore, his Angora chaps, and he crawled on the thing. Went around the corral a couple dozen times, and he said, open the gate. So they opened the gate, and away he went across the sagebrush down the river there someplace. He spent a day and a night somewhere down the river toward the hot springs or someplace. And he come back to the place on Rocky Butte. Mother never paid attention to all his doings. And said, once he come in riding a white horse. Was tame, broke, gentle. Come riding to the yard and got off, took his saddle and everything off. And where'd you get that horse? And, I got him down the river.
Yeah, I'm not too sure that's what he just told me about. That's what he said. There was 7 crossings. They would cross the river probably over there, and then they would cross over. That one way over there is a little shallower. When they go to church, they would cross over. There's still a lot of ice. Then they would go across this. All the guys going to church.
The Indians found this Red River cart there, and they said that as far as they could go with the cart, so they must have just left it there and took their horses and forded here and went on wherever they were headed.
Oh.
And they said that's how it got its name, wagon wheel. And they said these old Red River carts had wooden wheels, and then they're all wrapped with rawhide.
Oh. Huh.
And I think they were first ones to use them was them Chippewa Indians. They went right over that saddle into Ferry Basin.
Uh-huh.
The ferry was in here someplace, but I'm just got my doubts now with this thing here. See, this used to be still, and the river was over there.
Uh-huh.
But I think it must have been up at that point where they crossed over. We come down from Narada one time to get on we was going to cross on the ferry, and we got down but near into Wilkes Gulch, and we met a guy, and he's, "Where you guys going?" I said, "We're heading for Post Creek." I said, "We're going to Dixon and cross there." And he said, "Oh, you better not try it." He said, "The high water's got the ferry about washed out." So we had to backtrack and come around by Perma. And I don't think that ferry run after that, and that was in the first part of the 20s. And it set right in here someplace. Because all them old homesteaders hauled hay across here, and they're what grain they had. Seattle lived right across over there. He raised quite a family, and he had a lot of horses branded with a crowfoot. And then he had cattle over there, and this is where they used to ford and cross over there. And when I watched my dad that day direct Clay Williams across, he started him over there, and he kept working him over. He must have worked him to each island and then over, and then brought him out onto the bank.
Oh.
And that was in 1910 when the big fire was on. And a lot of the Indians had come from Camas Prairie here, and then they'd ford across to come into Mission. Cross Prairie. Well, I suppose all the Padres would use it too, coming up this way. So I suppose when they were going back over, they camped here and then moved across, or they come across and camped. Because I remember my dad crossed them cattle here when old Louis Brooks drowned on them. Well, they'd got the cattle, he said, putting her all across, and they just had a little short place that he had to swim, and then he'd been on the bank. And said he don't know what happened to him. He just hit his horse side the head with his bridle, and the horse turned over.
Oh, gee.
When they found him, he had a big bruise in his head, I guess, where the horse's hoof hit him.
Uh-huh.
I think my mother said I was about 3 years old, because I could remember old Brooks and that. And on the horse roundup said, camp up and down our creeks there, stick gaming.
Yeah.
They said old Louis Brooks would come back sometimes, all he'd have is his shirt. Maybe he wouldn't even have that. Play stick game every night. And old Frank Joss and Cashola said all through here is a winter crossing for game. And he said when we wanted any meat, he said we'd go on that side of the river and get in them bluffs, and he says that's where you'd find them.
Oh.
And he said certain time of year is when they'd move over, when the snow ice would run them out here. After you get out of the trees over there, then you hit that Little Money flat, where old lady Little Money lived.
Oh, yeah.
And when Frank Parker and Lucy Lope from Arley, Dave Couture said they come over Camas Ferry. I guess they walked. And they stayed a couple days with him and his wife. And then they walked right over the hill from Clear Creek and come down to old lady Little Money's, never left her. Stayed right there and raised her family, and then when she died, she willed them all what she had there.
Down this river we see different animals. One time in particular was down river a ways, and was just coasting along visiting, and in the brush we could hear a bear, we could hear some noise. We was listening, we thought it was a cow for a while, and then a bear come out of the brush and straight into the water, started walking around out there.
Yes.
He didn't see us, he just kept coming out in the water, swimming around. Pretty soon we started making noises, and it turned and wasn't sure if we were in the water or not. So it took a long time to get back to shore, and then it took off. He was really, really close to us.
Actually, there's a lot of food that's there in that river. There's fish, and there's beavers, and there's muskrats. There's lots of the Indians still eat muskrats and beaver, and there's all kinds of berries, choke cherries, savas berries, and stuff like that that we can gather along the river.
Right across the bridge on Sloan's, this day it's all cement. But it used to be the old wooden bridge too there. You cross that and then get on the south side or the west side of the river, then you go about a quarter of a mile. Then it used to be little cabins. Ma, she used to play around there with her aunt and grandmas and stuff. And then the geese in the spring, she learned the flights of the geese, what time of the year they come in, going north and going south. Now she just about learned their language. Early spring when they're headed north, well then the way they'd squawk and cackle and everything, well then she kind of got the hang of it. Then in the fall too, she kind of got the hang of it. When they'd get there, she could tell just about the way they sound. If it's an early winter, a hard winter, or whatever, this type of thing. She learned that Pacific Flyway, more or less.
Down farther toward Dixon, they trapped along there. Beaver had come in there, and they used to laugh about it. Said beaver trying to dam the river. You know, they'd build little structures out there, all 10 feet maybe, and then they'd give it up, but they'd leave them little structures out there, part of their dam. Eventually, probably in the spring, when the ice come down, it wiped their little dams, but they only went out about 10 feet, maybe more. Then they'd give it up. They'd fall trees, you know, and they'd try to build on them trees. But realizing they couldn't span that river, they'd give it up.
Yeah, we used to go clear down to north of Sloan Bridge, and camp there for a whole night. We'd go there to fish for squawfish. Now, my stepdad knew how to catch nothing but trouts if he so desired, or whitefish, or suckers. But yet we'd go into all that trouble to go down there just to catch a squawfish. And he'd catch a whole mess of it, and that whole thing would be clean and boiled, and then they'd have a big feast. Now, I never did care to eat fish myself because it's so bony. And my folks were not the only ones who did that. Once in a while, other flatheads would go down there on their buggies and wagons just to fish for that squawfish. And then when they'd catch a mess of it, then they'd have a tremendous feast there by themselves. Even just the squawfish and maybe bread and coffee or tea or whatever. And after they ate a nice mess of it and they were nice and full, then they came back home. That's about the only time that we ever camped along the river.
But I'm pretty sure this is the same eddy here. But somebody told me after the dam went in, there was a current went through here and cut it all out.
Oh.
It's a little bit of a stream of it when the winter'd come in here.
Uh-huh.
And then after the dam was built, why, I lost a lot of them places. One down by Magpie done the same thing. And old Peter Charlie said it raised heck with them up there by his place. Said one day you'd set your beaver traps. You couldn't hardly get out to them. He said maybe the next day or two you go back there, they'd be way out on the land. So he quit trapping, he said.
Yeah.
That big eddy down there below Dixon used to be a great fishing ground. And the old ferry was there. Of course, that was put in by white people. There was a little ford there, too. I remember old lady Kootenai used to take the old man down there. She'd set his box he'd set on and his bait by him. And then she'd get in her buggy and she'd go back uptown and stay with my aunt, and he'd sit there and fish all afternoon. He was blind.
They say along the river you never be relaxed along the river. Oh yeah. Down there. No, my grandmother told me. She says, "Don't go swimming here. There's something no good in the river." There was people that drowned in. These kids were floating down the river and they fell into the river. And then when they went after them, they found them sitting in the river. They were looking at each other when they found. They were black and blue around the waist. Something grabbed them around the waist. And then Frank Big Crane's daughter. It was right around the same area. I guess there's something that's terrible in the river. That's what they say. That's why I quit swimming. They might think I'm a grasshopper and bite me out of the river.
One thing, I guess I'll never forget it. And now they haven't got that bridge there, but I know where that ledge of rocks is, just kind of outcropping. That's where she was just stuck. Just upright, That's why her hair was just going around like that, He and I reached over. But that sight, I'll never forget that.
I swam the river at the bridge. I'd done that on a on a bet, and swam from the west side to the other side just as a dare or bet. I swam the river, and that's first and last. Things happened out there in the middle of that river that I'll never forget. I had to really fight there in a couple of places to make it across. But it is something that now I don't encourage nobody to try that because of the experience that I had. And I don't know what it was, but it was a good experience. And so I don't ever encourage anybody to swim that river any place, even in the narrow places. So that, my knowledge of the river is limited. I don't really know too much about it except that it's greatly respected. I think it should go on to be respected. It's not something that we should just let go and just, you know. Nature's had her way down through there. There'll be changes, and river flow might be a little bit different here and there, but still there, you know. And we learn to respect what we have. Same as we do with the mountains up there. We don't want to see the mountains change. And so that's about the thing that I know about the rivers. The important thing is the Indian people made a living from them rivers. They survived in winter to fishing from the rivers. The fish they got back in them times, they dried all the meat they got. Not like modern times, you don't have freezers and things to rely on. Back in them times, all the meat and deer meat, the meat that they got was dried, and fish dried right along with it. And so that is the important part of that river. It flows every day. You don't ever stop. You can go down there any time of the day and see water moving by. You wonder what happens to that water. But the important thing, I guess, you wonder, where does it come from? It don't belong to me. It don't belong to my neighbors. It belongs to the Creator. He caused it to flow, and it's going to continue to flow.
And I think when I was about around 8, 9, or 10, right around in there, was the last time that we came across on horse and wagon. Because I remember coming across. I remember my grandma used to haul around coming down Sloan's Hill on the wagon because we never had no brakes other than the horses. So being here today really brings back a lot of memories. I remember when I was too small to go hunting, I'd be, you know, not in this area but in the other camp area. You could see the mountains from there, and I could sit at camp and I could watch my brothers and my cousins up on a hill walking. Be walking up there, and pretty soon you can hear shots going off, and you can sit there and watch, and you can watch them dragging deer down and getting it out, and pretty soon then I'd run back to my grandma and tell her the news that they got one, and she'd get ready to start cutting and drying the meat. It's been good to come down here again and remember all of that, all the growing up I did along the river here. And I'm sure there's a lot of people, a lot of other people that have the same or similar memories that I have here. It's been good to come back again.